Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much for your presence this morning. Good morning. My name is Savannah Eldridge. I'm the lead organizer for the Abolish Slavery National Network. At ASNN, we envision a United States where all people, without exception, are free from slavery and involuntary servitude, and where all people are protected by their state and federal constitutions. What we know is that at the time when our founding fathers scribed that all men were created equal, over 500,000 Black Americans remained enslaved. We are here, nearly 157 years later, to close a revolving door that freed some and returned most to the very same conditions from which they fled. Let me be clear, our work is not predicated on wordplay or the reconstruction of words to rewrite history. And although arguments persist about what the language really means, it's really very clear. Slavery is only mentioned in our Constitution as it pertains to the 13th Amendment, and duly noted, the prohibition of slavery and involuntary servitude cannot exist with exceptions, provisions, or excuses. Slavery is prohibited except for those who've been duly convicted of a crime. And so it is written in our nation's Constitution, which governs our land and the people therein, and reflects our values that we disapprove of slavery, but we have refused and continue to refuse to disallow it, although we know what it looks like. It looks like working in the heat of the day in triple digit temperatures in Texas prisons with no air conditioning, or the rationing of food or other basic necessities in response to peaceful demonstrations, as in Alabama. It just is. And in our states, whether it's our Constitution that carves out specific language to abolish slavery, or whether it defers to the 13th Amendment, which safeguards its practice, what's not arguable is that forced labor continues today. At ASNN, we strongly support the work of our network partners who are taking action to absolutely end the vestige of slavery and are encouraging the residents of the Freedom Five who've been given the opportunity to make the decision to let the people decide in their very own communities. At this time, we'll hear from representatives from each of the 5 states with ballot initiatives this elective cycle, and we'll begin hearing from our Vermont representative, Dr. Mark Hughes, who's the executive director of the Vermont Racial Justice Alliance and working on the campaign for Prop 2.
Morning to all. Good morning to all, and thank you, Savannah. We're proud to be a part of this rich work that's happening across the United States. Here in the state of Vermont, we are in a very, very unique position in the state of Vermont, and that is to say that we know and understand that the language in our Constitution clearly provides for exception to slavery. We know that we were the first state actually to do so. In fact, our Constitution reads very clearly that no person born in this country or brought from overseas ought to be holden by law to serve any person as a servant, a slave, or apprentice after arriving to the age of 21 years, unless bound by the person's own consent after arriving to such age or bound by law for the payment of debts, damages, fines, costs, or the like. We also know that this language has existed within our Constitution for the last 245 years. That is dating back to 1777, which predates the Constitution of the United States. In fact, we know that the language in our Constitution served as a precedent whereby which all other states would adopt this type of language with exception clauses. The good thing is we also know that the thoroughly vetted proposal for Amendment 2 has been reviewed by our legislature not just once but twice. And what it says simply is therefore slavery and indentured servitude are in any form are prohibited. We're happy to be a part of this. We know that as it arrives on the ballot, there are many, many, many folks in Vermont who are excited about being a part of this campaign. We shout out our statewide partners, Vermont Interfaith Action, as well as our national partners, not just the Abolish Slavery National Network, but also Faith in Action. There's a lot of folks who are looking to get this work done. There's a lot of folks who are excited in Vermont to see it happen. We believe that we will win. We believe that at the end of the day, when it becomes November 8th in Vermont, that we will have accomplished something that has not been accomplished in 245 years in this state. So we say proudly and we say richly, what a time to be alive. We're encouraged to work alongside the Abolish Slavery National Network and our four sister states at this time to get this work done. Blessings to all, and thank you for checking in on us here in the brave little state of Vermont.
Speakers during the Q&A session immediately following the presentations. Next, we'll hear from Oregon campaign. We have Sterling Cuneo. Sterling is executive board member of the Oregonians United to End Slavery. Sterling.
Ballot Measure 112 removes the slavery loophole in Oregon, where upwards to 68% of the residents polled don't even know this racist relic still exists enshrined in both law and practice. This bill began when a group of young students from Willamette University and a group of men incarcerated inside the Oregon State Penitentiary decided to get the slavery exception to the voters. For the prisoners, it is about shedding the status of slaves. And for the students, it's about wanting to live in a society where slavery does not exist in any form. From the underground, a grassroots effort grew into bipartisan support in the passage of Senate Joint Resolution 10 and is now before the voters in 1 month. And we believe Oregon voters will vote to remove the slavery loophole as a reflection of our state's current values. However, our path to victory is not easy nor guaranteed. Not only are we in effort with one of the state's smallest ever campaign budgets, but ballot language that came back from the legislature intended to preserve voluntary community service and work release programs as alternatives has been confusing. Another challenge we face is that Oregon's authorization of slavery and involuntary servitude is bifurcated. The slavery exception and a mandate of labor are in two separate parts of the Constitution, and early advisors believe that dismantling two constitutional provisions simultaneously wasn't as likely to succeed as an effort to dismantle one and then the other. So we are tasked with the movement building for a two-part strategy towards complete abolition. Although we have no organized opposition, there have been attempts to sow doubt about the measure, requiring us, Oregonians United to End Slavery, to focus our final push on voter education. And therefore, we see our path to victory in raising awareness of slavery's existence still in our states. We are canvassing, phone banking, employing digital campaign strategies, hosting and attending events, and fundraising. To support or learn more about our efforts in Ballot Measure 112, go to Oregonians United to End Slavery.com. Thank you.
Thank you, Sterling. Up next, we will hear from Theda Murphy. Theda is a lead organizer or co-lead organizer for No Exceptions Tennessee.
Good morning. I'm so happy to be here this morning with my comrades who are carrying this movement forward. In Tennessee, this movement was born behind the walls and was birthed through the collaborative efforts of No Exceptions, Free Hearts, and Unheard Voices outreach. Currently and formerly incarcerated people and the people who love them created this movement and continue to fight for it. When it passes, the victory will be all ours. So Tennessee, the birthplace of the Klan, like the rest of the South, made a seamless transition from plantations to prisons. We have never been free. Slavery was never abolished. It was simply redefined. So it's way past time for universal abolition. As long as we make excuses for why it's okay for human beings to be owned and treated like property, none of our dreams of a just and equitable society can be realized. If anyone is enslaved, no one is free. We work so hard on reforms, and then we wonder why we always end up in the same place. It's because slavery is the default position. After the initial energy of the reform is spent, the system resets itself. We simply cannot move forward until we address this basic wrong that is at the foundation of all of our societal institutions. So in Tennessee, this is a bipartisan initiative, which, as was required, passed through 2 successive sessions of the Tennessee State Legislature with almost complete support. So what other issue, especially in the South, is bringing the 2 parties together? No one is supporting slavery in 2022. So we've got to fix this for good with no exceptions. So vote yes on Amendment 3 in Tennessee. And so one more note for Tennessee voters. In order for your vote to count on the constitutional amendment, you have to cast a ballot in the governor's race, and write-ins count as a vote. So please do not skip it. Thank you.
Thank you, Theta. Next, we'll hear from Alabama. Representing Alabama is Pastor Kenneth Glasgow, who's the GOTV lead organizer and founder of the Ordinary People Society.
Hey, how you doing? First of all, I would like to tell y'all thank you so much, and we want to give a big ups to Abolish Slavery National Network for joining in with us in a fight that we've been fighting for 20 years, 28 years, inside and outside. When I told the brothers on the inside about this and that we would be able to have it on Alabama Constitution, uh, looking at Alabama Constitution for taking away the racist language, they were ecstatic. One of the things that I want you to know about Alabama is Alabama has the longest, over 5,000 words, constitution in existence, more amendments than any other constitution. And right now, Alabama is under fire by the Department of Justice for their inhumane acts, their inhumane treatment, violating the 8th Amendment and the 14th Amendment. This is work that needs to be done. But the main thing that I want us to focus on Amendment 4, November 8th in Alabama and all across this country, is that it's time to heal. We done suffered from slavery so much, even after slavery have left. We see the results of it through mass incarceration. We see the results of it through all the things that are going on with inhumane treatment. I believe once we take the exception clause of that no man can be under involuntary servitude or slavery out of the mindset, out of it being written in our books and our constitutions across each state, in our federal constitution, then I believe we could take it out of our hearts and ourselves, and we could start to heal each other. As one of my colleagues said earlier, nobody wants slavery. Nobody wants to be the supporter of slavery. So if nobody wants to support it, why is it still written? Once we take away the written part, let me say this being a pastor, whenever they wanted to erase somebody out of history, Whenever they wanted to act like that person no longer exists, they struck their names from the books. Once we strike slavery, good God Almighty, I'm sorry, y'all, I don't want to preach, but once we strike slavery out of our books, out of our constitutions, statewide and federally, then we could finally say slavery is gone, and we could start to heal our relations in our race, in our acceptance of each other, in our classism, and all the other isms that exist. I'm so glad to be involved in this and looking at this. We have a prison strike right now because of the inhumane treatment and everything, and they are willing to do whatever it is to say, hey, we are human beings, we are people, and we just want you to see us that way. We don't want to be here. We don't want to make any more mistakes, but we want to be accepted as people and not slaves. Thank you so much, man. I'm going to end with that before I start preaching, but God bless you and thank you.
Thank you, Pastor Glasgow. And last but not least of the 5 states represented today will be Louisiana. Louisiana is represented by Curtis Davis, who's the lead organizer for Amendment 7 and also the executive director of Decarcerate Louisiana.
Good morning. Louisiana has had a so-called slavery exception clause in its state constitution for more than 157 years. What is now come to be known as Amendment 7 is on the November ballot after the unanimous passage of House Bill 298 through both the state House of Representatives and the Senate. The clear legislative intent of this initiative is to remove slavery and involuntary servitude from the Constitution. However, opponents of our initiative have orchestrated a confusion campaign to mislead voters about the meaning of the bill. As a matter of fact, our bill's author, Representative Edmund Jordan, who's a Democrat, has stood with the chief Republican opposer and stated publicly that he will vote no on the amendment, citing that it may cause unintended consequences. As the bill currently reads, in pertinent part, slavery and involuntary servitude are prohibited except in the latter case as punishment for a crime. The new amendment would read, slavery and involuntary servitude are prohibited, period, with the compromise clause that states subsection 1 will not apply to the otherwise lawful activity of the criminal justice system. The biggest problem that we're having is explaining the confusing ballot language, which is a question. It states, do you support prohibiting involuntary servitude except as it applies to the lawful administration of criminal justice? Most potential voters are worried about the word except in the ballot language and think that it's going to transfer to the Constitution, which it will not. And others are concerned about the fact that otherwise lawful activity of the criminal justice system may lead to an expansion of slavery, meaning that some activist judge will sentence people to slavery and say that that's an actual lawful activity of the criminal justice system. This is disingenuous at best and intellectually dishonest at worst. If slavery and involuntary servitude are prohibited, period, then the otherwise lawful activity of the criminal justice system would be something other than the two outlawed first parts of our amendment. Louisiana currently sentences everyone convicted of a violent crime to hard labor. We're already a slave state. Take it from a man who served 25 years, 9 months, and 11 days as an involuntary servant. If you guys don't believe that this changes anything, it's only because you've never went through the condition of slavery. And I'll leave with that. The vote 7, the vote yes on 7 actually means that slavery will be abolished. The vote no on 7 means that we keep 157 years of the same treatment that we've been doing for 157 years. Have a great day.
Before we go on to our next speaker, I'd like to thank each of the states represented here today, Vermont, Tennessee, Oregon, Louisiana, and Alabama, for your tireless campaign work. And next we'll hear from our National Campaign Director, Max Parthas.
Hello, everybody. My name is Max Parthas, and I believe now is the time that we'll be going into the Q&A. If we have received questions from press, we'll go ahead and put those on screen. If they're directed at a particular member of the Freedom Five, we will have them respond to it. And if there are general questions, Savannah and myself will try to answer them. So do we have questions at the moment to our producer?
We actually do. We have from Lexi Krupp at Vermont Public. She said, I've noticed that almost every state campaign has involved incarcerated folks. Curious if that has been the case in Vermont too. Are we adding Mark into here to answer that question? Okay.
Yes.
Hey, Lexi, thanks for the question. I definitely appreciate it. So we definitely have some members of the inside that we've developed relationships with over the years. Some of them have been briefed on some of the things that we're doing here. But just to be 100% clear in terms of transparency, Lexi, unlike most any of the other campaigns, our work started on the outside. Our work on abolishing slavery in Vermont was the breadcrumbs, and this just goes to show you that we're not a monolith, and there's a lot of ways to come to the conclusion that abolishing slavery is just a good idea. But our work originated as a result of us understanding that systemic racism is the legacy of the institution of slavery, and looking within the Constitution and understanding that it was just reprehensible and unacceptable to have any representation of slavery within the Constitution, while at the same time understanding that there's huge implications on the criminal justice system, as well as various other institutions, whether it's DCF, migrant workers, whether it's any of the other institutions that are implicated. So yeah, yes and no is the answer to the question in short.
Thank you, Mark. All right. Do we have any other questions at this point, Gina?
Sorry about that. We actually have James. He's behind the scenes with us. We're going to go ahead and add him in. I know he had a question for Curtis, so I'm going to drop myself out, bring James in, and bring Curtis in.
Hello. Is Curtis in yet? Okay. Hey, Curtis, how you doing? I'm James.
Good morning, James.
I'm from
Bloomberg.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I picked up on your statement at the end about being in prison. I wanted you to explain a little bit more about what you went through and what inmates are continually going through in Louisiana, because you called it forced labor. So I wanted to get a little bit more description on that.
Definitely. I was convicted in Louisiana on a 10-2 jury. That's a non-unanimous jury. We're now calling them Jim Crow juries. So we're in the Deep South in Louisiana State Penitentiary, better known as Angola, and picking cotton, picking okra, peas, pecans, shucking corn, all at the point of a gun. If you fail to work in a speedy, efficient manner, you can be forcefully made to work or eventually even shot. If you hurt yourself while you're working in the field, they consider it destruction of state property, because a lot of what the slavery exception clause is, it's an ownership rule. It's now making human beings the property of not any longer the master of a plantation, but the state, who is the owner and master of the people that find themselves back in this condition, whether they actually done the crime or they didn't do the crime. The Louisiana criminal justice system has used their legal apparatus as a weapon against mostly marginalized communities to make you subject and marginalized in such a way that we have returned back into a condition of slavery or involuntary servitude.
And what penitentiary was this?
Louisiana State Penitentiary, better known as Angola.
And you were really picking cotton and doing stuff?
Yes, I have actually picked almost every staple agricultural crop product known to man. Angola is the size of Manhattan, New York. It is the largest prison plantation on the planet Earth.
Wow. It's amazing. Well, thank you very much. I appreciate it. I'll let somebody else ask a question.
Thank you very much, both James and Curtis. I do remember Curtis telling me a story about, because there are no facilities for bathrooms out there on the plantations, there are times when inmates are expected to simply do it outside as if they were animals. Am I correct in that?
Yes, sir. We felt like it was a violation to the 8th Amendment of the United States Constitution to not have portable toilets, and it was beneath human decency for a grown man to have to squat and defecate in front of 100 other people. But they feel like now that you're in the condition of slavery or involuntary servitude, you don't have the right that rises to the level that allows you to have privacy when you use the bathroom.
Thank you, Curtis, very much.
Yes, sir.
Gina, do we have other questions? You may be on mute.
Of course. Just back from Lexi saying thank you so much for organizing. Very powerful. She said, I guess I do have one more question. Just curious how this timing worked out that these 5 states have these amendments up for a vote now.
Well, that would be a state operations question. We originally had as many as 15 states that had submitted legislation. Our producer, Gina Kenny, represents Ohio, which is one of those states. And there was a concentrated effort to stop those bills from going forward. For instance, we were often subject to the gag rule, where we could not even get these bills to be scheduled to be heard by committee. So whoever was the president of the committee and the chairman got to decide whether or not slavery would continue in those states. So we faced that all the way down to the finish line. So the 5 that you see now are the 5 that made it to the finish line to actually get this on the ballot. But there were many more who were involved. And in 2023, we expect 24 states to repeat the process, and 6 of them already have their legislation done. All right, I see we have another question on the screen there.
Yes, next question. Good morning. This is from New Brown. I'm the editor of San Francisco Bay View National Black newspaper. Our governor said it was too expensive to end slavery. Did any of you experience this argument?
Too expensive to end slavery. I don't know if any of our representatives are able to answer that question. Is there a way for them to put their hands up? If not, I will take a stab at it. Pastor Kenneth Glasgow said yes, he can answer that. And so did Sterling. So let's bring them both in, and we'll start with Pastor Glasgow.
So we definitely ran into that problem here, especially in Alabama. One of the things we have to look at in TOPS, I'm the founder of TOPS, the Ordinary People Society. We are TOPS.org. We are TOPS.org. We're the oldest existing criminal justice, prisoners' rights, voting rights organization in existence today. And we ran into that when we tried to stop them from building prisons, and along with the exception clause being omitted. And one of the things that they equated it to was that if they stop slavery or end slavery or stop building prisons to continue slavery, then the economy within the state would actually go down. They even, after 3 attempts of building new prisons, and we stopped them with community, not prisons, they have went to the United States government, Mr. Parthas, and got them to give them $400 million of COVID relief money. Now, Alabama is the most deaths for COVID-19 than any other state, but they took $400 million of the COVID relief money to build new prisons because they said it's too expensive to stop slavery.
As much as $2 billion worth of new prisons that they're building, Governor Kay Ivey. And her response to the recent strike was to say that the demands were just too much, and they were asking for the most basic, simple recognitions of their humanity. Thank you, Pastor Glasgow.
And this is after the Department of Justice has declared them inhumane. Even after the Department of Justice has declared them inhumane in their treatment.
What you're referring to is the investigation by the Department of Justice that has determined that there are rampant 8th Amendment violations and 14th Amendment violations happening within the Alabama prison. We just saw a recent memes and videos coming out about a gentleman who was dying in the prison and left unattended without any health care. You might know his name.
Vaughn.
Right. Say the name again.
Costello Vaughn.
Costello Vaughn. Please look up that name and see what they're doing to this man. It is a crime against humanity. Thank you, Pastor Glasgow.
Thank you.
Brother Sterling.
Yeah, so in Oregon, the only public statement that we have in opposition came from the Oregon Sheriff's Association. But during the legislative process, when we was struggling around the language just to get it through the Senate Joint Resolution, it was frequently brought up, and one of the talking points of those opposed was that this bill would result in the state having to pay anybody currently incarcerated. Not even related to the work that's exploited from them, but that simply they would have to pay anybody incarcerated, and therefore that would break state budget. And so we've run across that as well.
Thank you, Sterling. Much appreciated. And also thank you, Sister Nube Brown, for bringing that question up. She was referencing what occurred in California, where the argument that killed our bill there was made that if they were to remove involuntary servitude from the state constitution, they would be, and they were forced, I don't know where this came from because it wasn't part of our bill, but they were forced to pay minimum wage to inmates there. It would cost the state $1.5 billion a year in order to pay inmates for the work that they're doing. And we're talking about a state that has the largest carceral population on earth, where there are like 34, 35 prisons with 70 factories built right into the prisons, where they do quite a bit of work there. Nonetheless, what the statement said to the world was that slavery is perfectly fine as long as we claim we can't afford it. And this came from a state that had just got nearly $100 billion in surplus, that was concerned about having to pay $1 billion to people who are fighting forest fires and losing their lives doing it as involuntary servants. All right. Any other questions that we have, Gina?
I'm actually adding Sam, and he, I believe, had a few or a couple.
All right.
I think the last question that we had, and first of all, I want to say thank you to all the speakers. My name is Sam Haas, and I'm helping ASNN with press. And one of the last questions that we had texted in was about other states looking to join this effort in the years ahead. Max, if you want to take that.
Yes, you can contact me via email at max@abolishslavery.us, max@abolishslavery.us, and we'll go from there. We will be organizing. We have as many as 30 some odd states left to go. The overall effort is to eventually, in the next few years, remove the exception clause from the federal constitution. And so we need 3/4 of the state's representatives on board. And by working state to state, we're not only removing these exception clauses from those state constitutions that have them, or adding protection to states that do not have anything, but we're also pulling together those 3/4 of the representatives to be able to make sure that we end slavery once and for all.
Thank you, Max. And for any other journalists on here, my email is the email list on the press advisory for this event. It's sam@slingshotstrat.com. If you have any further questions, please don't hesitate to reach out. I want to remind you that every time this question has been pulled, both individually in states and nationally, the overwhelming majority of Americans have no idea that slavery is still very much permitted in the text of the 13th Amendment itself. And this is what it's all about, folks. So thank you all for being here. Please don't hesitate to reach out with any further questions or any way that we can be helpful. And Max, back to you.
Thank you, Sam. We do have another question. It looks like an independent journalist out of Vermont wants to know if there's any information available that describes the commercial food system in southern LA, Louisiana, and how Angola prison intersects that system. So, Brother Curtis, would you be able to answer that question for us?
Yes, sir. It's well known that Louisiana sells a lot of their non-GMO crops to places like Whole Foods. Some of their cattle has been known to go to companies, fast food companies like McDonald's, but it's hard to get the data on how the products that are being cultivated in Angola prison are getting to public market. That's one of the things that we want to work on next year with legislation, to be more transparent, to see how the fruits of involuntary servitude are being distributed across the United States of America. And they have several Associated Press members that are doing deep dive investigations and exposés on following the money, finding out how this process is benefiting just a few vendor family organizations and not necessarily the state of Louisiana.
Thank you very much, Curtis. Much appreciated your knowledge and understanding. I do remember a few years ago, a story came out of Texas that we reported on our program, Abolition Today, that during the hurricane that hit Texas, the prison there lost over $500,000 in cotton. So they had $500,000 in cotton that had been picked by prisoners who get paid absolutely nothing in Texas. And they lost $500,000 during the flood or the water damage that destroyed that cotton. So that's just one example. Unless we have any more questions, I think it's time for us to close this out. I have a statement to make, and we're going to share a little piece of art with you at the end. So, Gina, is there any other questions? All right.
No,
Savannah,
I was just adding Savannah, and she wanted to do some closing remarks with you.
yes. Once again, ladies and gentlemen, Savannah Eldridge, the lead organizer for the Abolish Slavery National Network.
Just before we close, I'd like to thank everyone for tuning in this morning with us and invite you to follow our work at www.abolishslavery.us. Thank you. Back to Max.
Thank you, Savannah. All right. I would like to echo those sentiments. Thank you to the Freedom 5 representatives who are here today on behalf of their state campaigns to end slavery in those states. Thank you to the press who asked their questions and to those who are viewing. I'm Max Parthis, as I said earlier. I'm the National Campaign Coordinator for the Abolish Slavery National Network. Today you heard directly from representatives of the Freedom 5. Those 5 states out of many who emerged victorious in a historic and Herculean task of putting their state's offensive and destructive slavery exception clauses on the 2022 ballot. This so that the people may decide whether they want slavery to be enshrined as a legal and protected institution within their state. Make no mistake, this is neither symbolic nor meaningless. It is the necessary first step towards opening a door that has been closed to us for 400 plus years. The door to a nation where neither slavery nor involuntary servitude is legal or acceptable in any form for any reason to be used against anyone. In direct violation of international treaties on the abolition of slavery, at present the U.S. is the only nation on earth that constitutionally defines the conditions under which a human being can become property to be owned and operated, then applies it to millions in the largest prison population to have ever existed on planet Earth. We dream of and work towards a brighter day when this ancient evil no longer has a place in our society. We ask that you register to vote in Alabama, Tennessee, Vermont, Oregon, and Louisiana, that you vote this horror right into the depths of history. Visit their websites and make a generous donation. Sign up to be a volunteer. Now that you know, you are responsible for what you know. Each one teach one. We're only 4 weeks away from a once-in-a-generation opportunity. Do not let this moment pass us in silence and ignorance. Seize the day. I will close today's momentous presentation with a quote from the great abolitionist Frederick Douglass. I expose slavery in this country because to expose it is to kill it. Slavery is one of those monsters of darkness to whom the light of truth is death. Expose slavery and it dies. Light is to slavery what the heat of the sun is to the root of a tree. It must die under it. All the slaveholders ask of me is silence. He does not ask me to go abroad and preach in favor of slavery. He does not ask anyone to do that. He would not say that slavery is a good thing, but the best under the conditions, circumstances. The slaveholders want total darkness on the subject. They want the hatchway shut down, that the monster may crawl in his den of darkness, crushing human hopes and happiness, destroying the bondman at will, and having no one to reprove or rebuke him. Slavery shrinks from the light. It hates the light. Neither comes to the light, lest its deeds should be reproved. Frederick Douglass. Peace go with you, brothers and sisters. Freedom is coming, and we've only just begun.
We ain't learned shit because history keep repeating. Power of the pen, the ballot, our voice, there's no defeat. Trust our hearts, know our souls. The enemy will be retreating. Alec laws, slave patrols, future plantations, you through eating and killing people and destroying families and setting up systems of slavery. 3 strikes, war on drugs, over 2 million incarcerated. This just didn't came to be. Through strategy and lobbying, lying and conspiracy, anything you can think of to stop our prosperity. Worse than injustice. This is just plain out evil. Turn a blind eye because it's not your people. Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. That's what kings say. Mandatory minimums, plea deals of death, no due process coming your way. Trials are just scenes on TV that act, perform, a play. Take 3 years or risk 30. These prosecutors play dirty. Media convinces the world them darker folk ain't worthy. We savages and criminal, apathy gains subliminal, teach we have no morals, intellect, or principles. So it's easy to lock us away. They animals, they crave, so you beat us and mistreat us, but every dog has its day. Use us to fuel your corporate machine, anything you can dream, from your Idaho potatoes on your table to the sewing of your underwear seam. But that gleam in your eyes gonna flicker, because our comeback gonna be quicker. We peeped your plan, we know your game, we gonna come back bigger, bigger in number. Mass cooperation to combat and dismantle your mass incarceration. Everyone waking up, no more following indoctrination. We demand everything promised to citizens of this nation. So let's fix the flaw in Amendment 13. Stop acting as if it ain't inhumane. Stop acting as if it were you. You wouldn't want someone to feel your pain and fight to make it better, at least decent and fair. No matter what you've done, you still deserve care and consideration as a human being, just trying to live life. No thoughts if they have kids, their mama crying or breaking news to the wife. The call we all dread. You locked up or you dead. Worth more alive, put him in right, 300,000 a head. And it's always about the bread and creating a permanent underclass. Black codes of today, stop and frisk, won't let me pass. Again, live. Constant infringement of my liberty with laws and loopholes to stop me from being free. Can't breathe, can't breathe. We ain't learned shit.